a storyteller. We need storytellers. It should be in the news. It should be in comedy.
Home is a hostile lover. Remember when our delta waters were clean, how we washed our faces in rivers and chased fish with our bare hands. Remember, before Delta had its throat slit and bled its oily pipes into soil, when we hummed words into water and it would laugh and sing back. Noose. We are burning alive in this village. The oil pipes spew open like bowels and stain our homeland with curses. Our mouths have become coated in oil. Drops make liquid nooses around our necks, and our words buried and left for remains. We will never speak the same again. Eaten. Look how obese the ocean has become. The waves ingest my fertile land vicious and devour my home to its bones. The ocean leaves its offcuts when sated, and I am left a half-lit emblem. Tell me, where does one turn to when their home becomes a hostile lover? Sinking. They're all sinking in the Mediterranean Sea. Our borders have become dense and long, and their ships have burst into splints. The sea is bloated with people's limbs. Their memories did not make it either. They're all sinking in the Mediterranean Sea. Watch how the bubbles float and pop. Funeral. Does my alarm clock wake me or the nightmares? I often cannot tell. Both remind me of a lonely funeral. I share a room with strangers. We breathe in damp and each other's lungs. We are wheezers who will not complain. We are still sinking on dry land. Future. I work long to send money home, but they are sure of the future here. At home, everything is on quicksand, so we speak in the present tense. For home is an exposed nerve waiting. I work long here, saving my money, hoping to send the future back home. Danger. You tell me to save the planet, to reduce my carbon footprint, buy local, to turn my lights off. My footprints are not wanted here. I buy what you think I steal. I am afraid of what darkness might bring. You speak like I don't know danger. My name is Lulu, and that was Home is a Hostile Lover, a poetic piece that I wrote a few years ago. And it's always a bittersweet feeling when a poem becomes more and more relevant as the years pass. But I wrote this at a time where I didn't feel like narratives around climate justice really were expansive and connected to the world around us. And so I wrote this piece with the aim to take the reader on a journey through different sites of climate violence across the world, both real and imagined, to connect to themes looking at race, belonging, migration, and home. Thank you very much.
Hello and welcome. This is Culture, the Missing Link, part of the COP26 Green Zone. My name is Sego Setintu Chiwanuka, also known as Love Sega, and I'm your MC for today. I'm a musician and I'm also an ambassador for Earth%. So first of all, we've got a bit of housekeeping for the audience here. We're delighted that this is virtual as well as in person. And also there's a university watch party that is going on. So Nottingham Trent University, welcome. Now there are fire exits to the left and to the right, and then also there are toilets to the right. There is a photographer going around today. So however, if you've got any reservations, then just mention it to the Julie's Bicycle team. And also the event is being done with BSL, so live as you'll see on your screens if you're tuning in virtually. Unfortunately, we can't have live captions. However, there will be auto-generated captions straight after the event, and they will be improved over the coming weeks. Now, for any of you here or at home, they're going to be, and you've got any questions, use Slido and use the hashtag #CreativeClimateAction. Similarly, if you've got social media, use the hashtags #CreativeClimateAction and also CultureCop26. So feel free to make your comments, pass on the questions throughout the event today. Now, today is Global Youth and Public Empowerment Day. And we are welcoming climate witnesses, activists, and artists today for all of the audience here in person and virtually. And we're delighted to have Elif Shafak, Disha R. Ravi, Prem Gill, Ez Devlin, and Nova Ruth. And we've already had that beautiful performance from Snila Ngulu, and we've got more performances from Zena Edwards, who's here with us, and also Nova Ruth, who's also here with us. And also we have Climate Stripes creator, Professor Ed Hawkins, MBE, here. So that's if you have a hand for our audience today. Now, we're delighted to have a film by British Council who are helping us put on the event today. And this film, we're going to hear from climate justice activists who will ask the question, what message would you like to take to COP26?
My one key message to take to COP26, there's still a hope. If we are fixing it simultaneously, there are still hope.
We need to walk the talk. We have seen commitment of 100 billion annually.
It's not enough. We need more actions and we need more advances.
For them to also show political will in dealing with the climate change crisis that is the defining issue of our time.
You know, a commitment to action right now. Yesterday, as we say in South America. We need it yesterday.
People are dying. People are losing their lives every day, every minute, every second. So the time to act is now.
Humans were smart enough to start the Industrial Revolution and speed up climate change. So it means we are smart enough to start a climate revolution.
Take the issue seriously in a holistic perspective. Don't divert the blame from corporations or political institutions.
We should all come together, those with resources, put as much as possible, those who can do more.
Take the responsibility together and act together.
With the collaboration of the talent in their countries.
We need to put investments in real projects on the ground, renewable energy, forest restoration, and more of these things at scale.
I think one of the most important issues about climate crisis is the biodiversity loss.
It's important to put climate as a face, the face of people, the face of ecosystems, and not only think of climate as an economy or policy issue.
It's not enough for ministers and politicians and campaigners to do the work, but we must show the people who are directly affected by climate change what is at stake for them.
The message is clear: invest in the arts and cultures as part of the integrated climate action interventions.
That way we can have a more sustainable campaign, a campaign that is owned by people and protected by the people.
Making the most of the indigenous knowledge to make it a locally rooted conversation in our indigenous spaces.
And we will ensure that the future of the humanity and the planet is saved, and we will ensure that we have each other's back.
The world is one. Culture, science, and creativity should be blended, should be brought together to save life.
How could we do this, face the hardest of tasks that we might have had to face as a humanity, which is the oncoming climate crisis?
Con un respeto en absoluto a la grandeza de la tierra, del universo, y de eso divino, espiritual e intangible.
Do it while we still laugh and enjoy being in this world. I think that this will open unexpected paths.
Love this earth.
Well, thank you, British Council, and thank you, Julie's Bicycles, and all the inspirational contributors there. And I think it's very powerful, the fact that this is called Culture, the Missing Link, that we had global voices there, because culture is not the preserve of one part of the world. As it was said in the film, culture is one. And we're lucky because we've got three of the contributors here with us. We've got Adenike, we've got Disha on the panel, and then also Nova Ruth. So next onto stage, we've got Chiara Badiali, who's knowledge and sector lead at Julie's Bicycle. And this is to hear about and to understand how creativity and culture are mobilizing as part of this, and what the latest research is behind this. So welcome to the stage, Chiara.
Everyone, thank you so much, Sego. Thank you, Selena, and thanks to all the contributors to the video that we just saw. Thanks to all of you for coming. Thanks to everyone who's tuning in. So I'm Chiara from the NGO Julie's Bicycle. We work to mobilize arts and culture on climate action. We were founded from within the UK music industry, but now work across the arts internationally. So nearly 15 years ago, Julie's Bicycle set out with 3 beliefs that still guide us to this day. That culture and the arts have to be at the heart of the global response to the climate and ecological crisis, that bringing our collective imagination and joint purpose to this challenge is the most valuable and inspiring work that we could be doing as a creative community, and that action comes in many guises and everything counts. So this moment where international climate negotiations take center stage is filled with renewed courage and greater resolve. We can remodel our societies and our patterns of consumption and the licenses we give to polluters to operate at our expense, or we cannot. We can address issues of equity and justice in how we make those choices, or we cannot. These are cultural questions. They're not questions of technology or finance. They are questions about what it is that we value, what future we want, and what world we can imagine. And all around this city and in cities around the world and outside cities around the world, the creative community is showing up on climate action. Some of them are doing so very loudly and visibly, but many, many more are doing it knitted into their communities, working at the local level, weaving us together, often much more invisibly. Artists using their platforms to make their own and others' voices heard, reflecting, documenting, and in dialogue with the changes unfolding through our homes and through our ecosystems, molding grief and anger into courage and power. Artists inventing and experimenting with the technologies that we need for tomorrow and unearthing the knowledge that we already had about living as part of nature. Venues, festivals, museums, galleries, recreating themselves as laboratories for a new zero-carbon future and as places of refuge in our tilting world. Helping people connect with their own creativity, their own sense of agency, and turning into active creators, shaping our material and conceptual worlds, making and sustaining communities, connecting people, giving us freedom of thought, helping us reframe challenges, see things from new perspectives, and connecting us with others on a much deeper level, giving us permission to think beyond where we are now, exploring those new realities and possibilities. Art, at its heart, gives us different ways of knowing, and culture emerges from all our many different ways of being. And in this moment where our futures are so uncertain, when we have to remake everything, this creative process that doesn't always pretend to have all the answers, but that helps us find those new truths in transformation and trust in each other is more essential than ever. And yet, too often, it still feels like the creative community is showing up in spite of. While finance and energy and politics debate in official halls, we work in the spaces between. Sometimes being outside the system is exactly what's needed, but what if we reimagine a COP process shaped instead around culture? Last week, Judy's Bicycle published Culture, the Missing Link in partnership with the British Council's Climate Connection programme. We've spent the last months speaking to artists, culture ministers, and cultural organisations around the world, from the UK to Indonesia, Turkey, Nigeria, Colombia, Italy, and many more. Today is our call to action to mobilise culture ministers at national levels to meet the climate challenge head-on. Governments are still missing the opportunity to link culture policy with environmental policy, leaving a huge gap to make sure the cultural sector is aligned with international climate commitments and unlocking the true potential of this creative climate movement. When we're embodying climate action, that's when we can get really disruptive. The culture sector needs to be fully represented alongside other sectors of the economy and society in designing effective climate policy. The creative community is here and we are ready. It's an awesome, deeply creative and deeply ethical task, and we have no choice but to rise to it with as much energy and joy as we can. So I'm now delighted to hand back to Sega and also introduce Ed Hawkins, climate scientist in the National Centre for Atmospheric Science at the University of Reading, a lead author for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Sixth Assessment Report, and of course, creator of the iconic warming stripes. Thank you.
So thank you, Chiara. This is a great privilege, and I think it's interesting because this topic is called Culture, the Missing Link. And here we have Professor Ed Hawkins here, who's a scientist. So we like to split things up into silos, but why is that the case? So before, I said at the top of this, I'm a musician, but before that, I did science, and I have a science PhD. So my supervisor at Cambridge is going to be very happy after all this time to actually be speaking to a scientist. So thank you very much, Ed Hawkins, for being here. Yeah, and as we've mentioned, the climate stripes, which you are sporting there, which I'm sure everybody here has seen, because it's the most ubiquitous form of climate messaging. And we've seen it from face masks. There's an installation, a light installation in the blue zone. If you go onto the BBC and you look at all of the coverage of COP, it's got the climate stripes here. So Ed, as a scientist, but also as a visual data person, what inspired you to create them?
So the reason we need graphics like this is to communicate in a simple, visual, stark way as possible. So I was actually invited to a literature festival in the town of Hay, a very famous literature festival, to do an event with an amazing poet and author called Nicola Davies. And she wrote some beautiful poems about the science and what is needed. And I was looking for a way of presenting the climate science very simply to an audience which probably aren't used to seeing scientific graphics and graphs and axes. And so I came up with this way of talking about the changes we've seen in the town of Hay. And so I created the climate stripes for Hay, showing temperatures changing from the blues to the reds, and presented it on the screen. And I could instantly see the audience recognize, I understand. It was very clear about the message. The world is warming and the town of Hay is warming as well.
So actually, I've got another question that's just come to me. What inspired you to go to Hay, a very famous literary festival, which everyone knows? Right?
So the festival wanted to put on events with environmental science, that they recognise the importance of combining science and arts together. And so we had several events there combining animations and artists and authors and poets. So it was a wonderful combination of art and science.
Yeah, well, I think that's fantastic. And again, it's a demonstration where scientists aren't just stuck in their lab trying to come up with wacky different things. Scientists are there, and if you do invite scientists, they will turn up and create something beautiful like the climate stripes. So what do the data mean that we're seeing here?
So this one graphic represents every single temperature observation available to science. There are billions of measurements of individual thermometers made over the last 171 years represented in this graphic, all over the world, over the land and over the oceans, made by hundreds of thousands of people. So what it shows is the change in global temperature over those 171 years. So there's one stripe per year, 1850 on the left, 2020 on the right. And as you can see, as time goes on, the colors change from blues and dark blues to gradually to lighter blues, to oranges, to reds, and then very recently, the very dark reds. And there's a very striking, stark change, especially over the last 50 years, where the temperatures have changed very quickly, and that is represented by this very dramatic change in color.
So, I mean, here we are, you in Hay-on-Wye, and then you created there. Here we are in Glasgow. So each individual place, even if you're in Papua New Guinea, you can create your own version of this.
Absolutely. So the other important issue is that although the globe is warming as a whole, and that's what we tend to talk about a lot, that's a very remote concept, global average temperature. Well, what does that mean? No one experiences that directly. People experience the changes where they are. And so it's critical to communicate the fact that things are changing locally. And so, yes, you can go to our showyourstripes.info website and download similar graphics for every nation around the world. And they've been used all over the world to spread that message that, yes, climate change is affecting us here and now.
Also, in terms of engagement, this is something I presume that even primary school children across the globe, they can get.
Anyone can understand this. You know, so my scientist colleagues despair because there's no numbers on it. There's no axes, right? But that's what makes it work, because it can be interpreted. It can be people can be creative with it, and there are many talented artists are being so creative with this graphic to communicate to different audiences. So one of the first uses was a chap in the United States painted his car, his Tesla car, in these stripes and took it to a motor show. And that's not necessarily the audience where you would have a conversation about climate change. But what happened was people came up to him and asked him, what on earth have you done to your car? You know, why is it these colors? And so it instantly started a conversation with an audience which wouldn't normally be engaged in that topic. And it drew people in, it allowed this conversation to happen. And we so need more local conversations like that with people who have similar interests to each other, because they are the trusted messengers, the trusted tribes that we live in. And having those conversations in those groups is absolutely critical. And that's why this graphic can be used so widely to start those conversations.
Yeah, so we mentioned, the face masks, and you can see it on the internet in different places. What are the other uses that have surprised you artistically in the broadest sense? Yeah.
So another one of the big first uses was by a rock band called Enter Shikari. And they have for a long time talked in their songs and their music about the issues of climate change and the risks that we face. And they took this graphic and used it as their backdrop for their gigs on the main stage of big festivals. And they're playing in Glasgow this week. They've specifically come to Glasgow this week and performed 2 gigs in here because they wanted to be here, and they had the graphic on the stage with them and talked about the climate crisis there.
So can I ask, when was the when was the festival? What year was that?
3 years ago now.
That was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So this is my tongue-in-cheek question. Do you ever get sick of seeing these?
In one way, yes, but also, every time someone sends me a new use, I just get emails, almost every day, people sending me photographs. I've seen your graphic all over the world, and that's so inspiring to see that people have taken up this and used it in so many novel and creative ways.
Yeah, because my questioning behind that is often we might see somebody like Vanessa Nakate or Greta Thunberg, and we might say, okay, they've done it. So Enter Shikari, similarly, they've done that. So I'm a musician, so again, challenging myself. Is it something where I should just say, oh, this band has done something, that's enough. This rock band has done it, this pop band has done it. But then what about the rap artists or grime artists or the folk artists? Isn't it something where we have to keep going with this message and the messaging?
We very much have to. The more people we can reach, the better. The conversations have to happen locally, because unless the solutions to the climate crisis are talked about in everyday conversation, and that will feed up through our voting and our policies and reach the politicians, because they're the ones having to make the very difficult decisions about what to do. And the decisions they make need them to be popular, otherwise they will become ex-politicians. And so it's so important why activism from the youth and from everybody here is so critical, to make it clear that the policies we need are popular and they will be supported. And so the more people, the more groups and the more artists that can use this graphic and many other graphics, it's not just this one, to start those conversations locally and inspire action, the better.
And I think that's a good note, because we have to reiterate, it is Global Youth and Public Empowerment Day. And I think this is a great example. So now, as you've gone around, and in a way, as an academic, as a scientist, you've placed yourself at this interface between where you're speaking to artists, you're speaking, obviously, your scientific community, and then now, obviously, you're a professor as well. What message do you have for some of the decision makers, based on what you have seen going to different parts, different places, and talking to different groups of people?
We have so many difficult decisions to make from our politicians, but many of them are decisions which are clearly going to be popular and we want to do anyway. You know, for example, I think one key message is that, for example, changing to electric cars, which is an obvious necessary step, that will clean up our air. We'll have better air quality, and that will save millions of lives around the world every year. These are decisions which are should be easy to make, because they will. We want to make them anyway, irrespective of the climate crisis. And so those types of things we need to emphasise. But I think what the youth have done is they've changed the conversation. You know, they really have. They've shifted the discussion away from the fringes on the sceptical side, from the lobbyists. That has been dramatically reduced because there's such a loud voice calling for action. And so it's been fantastic as scientists to see that in action. Our science is being used to inspire and change policy, and it's fantastic to see.
Well, I think that's amazing, because similarly we're inspired by the youth, but it's everybody across the chain, whether you're established artists, and then as a scientist to give the youth that information that we can then act on. So thank you very much, Professor Ed Hawkins.
Thank you.
And can I remind everybody that keep the questions coming in on Slido, #CreativeClimateAction. And next, can we welcome to the stage writer and performer Zena Edwards.
Information there and beautiful artwork. Wonderful, thank you. So this poem is called 2027 and thinking about babies. I work with a lot of young people, and a lot of young people comment and they say they're really fearful about bringing children into this world. And I'm like, no, you're the good people. Make babies. We need people like you to be bringing these good people into the world. And also this poem that I wrote was looking at the 2 degrees, which obviously it's shorter than that now, it's less than that now, where coffee and chocolate would be the most affected. And it's about how do we get the conversation on the ground, and where we can impact the conversation with everyday interactivity. So like, we all know that coffee and chocolate is in a lot of people's everyday. Imbibing of coffee and chocolate is something that we can do on an everyday basis. So this poem came about from that also. You exhale a comfortable mist of breath, and I watch your DNA collect kaleidoscopic in condensation on the bedroom windows. I am the first up with the autumn daybreak, and it opens a shivering song in my body. The coffee is good and strong, and the news bleats that the crops are almost gone due to climate change. Coffee is a sensitive plant. The courtships of the seasons are like a blur of burning ember to steel ice grey. In the shortest of times these days, it seems like 24 hours is nothing but an eventful tea break. There's a brash breeze that bristles the treetops in the garden. a breath born from a jagged tower block of ice, a cracked molar at the mouth of its mothering polar ice cap, a guillotine gasp as it tumbles, thunders into the Arctic waters, breaking its back, and a gale gallops 25,000 miles across oceans, licking up the waters in fury till they smash and sprawl their saline cure over coastal towns carried in the mighty arms of hurricanes named after favorite family members. And once in a while, we, in our bloated bellied cities, on high grounds, moral high grounds with low thresholds for sobriety from Jurassic flesh, once in a while, we lift our faces from the trough of consumerism and we see the clouds like buffaloes and bears clash, gnashing their teeth. We see them bite down on each other, bleed a chemical rain as they shake their necks free. And we are naively impressed with the welts of lightning, those fireworks. But we fail to see the wounds our high-rises and our ignorance cause as they needle the blotching skies, as we spend out of sync with the earth's budget, till soon her bile will be our crop. My Weetabix could be poison seed. Me and you, we used to take walks in the park and contemplate the balance between the city bustle and the rustle of grass underneath our feet. Now our eyes are skimming the city skyline at the top of Parliament Hill as we seek the shrinking, valuable green spaces. And now our weekend love banter is full of stats and facts and corporate responsibility, big bucks drowning under Stephen Hawking's prediction of our 100-year mortality, our finality. I nuzzle in your neck and you pull me close and you say, "Don't worry, lovely." And you tell me about how you're going to plan to build rafts from our bamboo futon bed base and sculpt oars from the shed door and row ourselves to other islands with more security. We'll all be refugees then, you said. And then you take my hand in answer to a beckoning memory of our hottest summer of love, when doodles broke free from behind the straight lines of our homework paper, to mountain bike, to snowboards, to hang glides, to Egyptian camel ride. I'm gonna do it, you said, I'm gonna do it, with just 55p and fluff in your pocket. I worked in the park kiosk, and I served you a dark coffee in a polystyrene cup upon which you promptly wrote your telephone number and told predictable jokes about dog owners looking like their pets, yada, 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 yada. But it was the crease in one corner of your smiling eyes that distracted me for well enough for 5 years from the brewing storm. But it's this morning with a pomegranate, fan-tailed sky, wing-tipped silvery pearl, that the question, why procreate, was on the lips of our minds. The decades will pass. Will we imagine our own extinction or rehumanize the moment, dismembered by the dissonance? You hug me from behind and I watch your DNA, your exhalation, dare to dream a determination of new ways, of new days of being. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just going to do a very quick song. I want us all to imagine ourselves to be artists. We are in an act of procreation, of creation right now. Our bodies the cells are dying off and hair is regrowing. So we're in the act of creation right now. So technically, as far as I'm concerned, human beings are artists all the time. So imagine that while I sing this song now. I am an endangered species, but I sing no victim song. I am human, I am an artist, and I know where my voice belongs. I am here, I exist. I shake my fist with these words from my lips. My mind is set and my body is strong. I sing of rebirth, no victim song. No, 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 no. 'Cause we are an endangered species, but we sing no victim song. We are human and we are artists, and we know where our voices belong. The system is blind, it binds my feet. It silenced this skin, no freedom of speech. I work all day so I can find peace. States of violence are at a peak. Na 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 na. 'Cause nature is life, this earth has got rights. We'll fight for her freedom all of my life. The road is long, but the struggle is strong. Think justice and peace, our victory songs. Na 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 na. 'Cause we are an endangered species, but we sing no victim song. We are human and we are artists, and we know where our voices belong. 'Cause we know where our hearts belong, and we know where our souls belong. Yes, we know where our bodies belong, and we know where we belong. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Zena. Like, now we're talking. Now we're talking. Yeah, because I mean, it shouldn't all be stodgy, all this stuff, and that's where with culture is to awaken us, and that was wonderful. And just, if I just take one line from that, was I think where you said, "We'll all be refugees soon." And I think that's the powerful thing, where we've got culture to invoke that emotion, that line in your poem, where it's like, we'll all be refugees. And then that's where it comes in, and then with the science, then to tell us, which might tell us where. And we need to be smart about this, because either we are going to be the people, if we're in the UK, to provide that refuge for other people, or the way we're going, we might be the refugees going somewhere else, and then we'll be hoping that they've done the same, which we should have been doing. So that was fantastic. And thanks Julie's Bicycle again, and Kiara, as you said, bringing this all together. You know, it doesn't need to be stodgy, you know, but we need action. And speaking of which, now move on to the next segment, which is the virtual stage, and to today's panelists. Bear with me, yes. And we have, I'm delighted, founder and CEO of Julie's Bicycle, Alison Tikel here, and we'll also have best-selling author and political scientist, Elif Shafak. We've got Disha R. Ravi, founder of Fridays for Future India. We've got Prem Gill, noted polar conservationist and wildlife filmmaker. And we've got Ez Devlin, artist and designer, and I was very lucky to see Ez's exhibit at the New York Times Hub, which is there. If you're here, get a chance, go and see that. And Nova Ruth, musician and founder of Arca Kinari. So over to you, Alison.
Thank you, Sega, and I kind of hope you guys have been listening to the wonderful, both Selena and Zena, and also Ed, that voice from the heart, actually. What a place to be, that responsibility that you guys hold for telling us difficult truths and asking us, appealing to us all to respond with every kind of ounce of our commitment and our creativity. And that's a real challenge, a real responsibility. And it's so great having so many artists. And this panel that I've got today is awesome, along with people who've come along. We're really, I think it shows that culture really has been at the forefront of so much of this thought, but as Kiara talked about, it has been buried. And I think now is the time, I feel it, Sega and I were talking about the kind of sense of volition that is finally beginning to happen, where culture, the arts, the creative industries are a really important part of the cultural community, who design and shape so much of what we know, what we wear, what we feel, what we put in our homes. are actually beginning to take this on. So I have an incredible panel. I'm really excited. I wish I could spend more time with you all, but we have Nova Ruth, I'm going to say in the order that I see you. Nova Ruth, Prem Gill, Nova Ruth is a fantastic artist from Indonesia who we talked to as part of this program that we've been doing. Beautiful performance, you're going to hear her later. Prem Gill, a conservationist, scientist, technologist, artist, and communicator, and also a social justice, a climate justice activist. So we'll hear about that. We have Disha, it is your day, on the streets, founder of Fridays for Future in India. Disha, I'm going to talk to you about your recent experience, quite extraordinary, amazing courage. We have the brilliant, wonderful, inspiring writer Elif Shafak. Many of you will know Elif's work. Oh my goodness, just published your latest book, which we'd like to hear about. And of course, the fantastic Ez Devlin, who is responsible for some of the biggest shows on the planet, including the Conference of the Trees that's here with us today at COP. So very, very exciting panel, and I welcome you all. If you guys have questions in the room, let us know, because we will take some questions at the end. And I know that questions are coming in on Slido. So I'm just going to charge in, and I'm going to start, I think, with Disha, because this day is in honor of young people as well as artists. So I'm going to start with you. It is your day. You've been accused of being a key conspirator and a collaborator with the Poetic Justice Foundation, which kind of blew my mind when I read that, which actually, in other words, means that you've been a collaborator in truth. And I just wonder if you'd like to tell us a little bit about what happened to you and what you pulled around yourself in order to get through the last year.
Honestly, I'm not allowed to talk about my case, but what did happen wasn't something out of the ordinary, because a lot of people in India, activists especially, get punished for their work in climate activism, or get punished for any any activism of any sort. And this has become the norm, and the government has criminalized dissent to a very large extent. It's not easy being an activist in my country, because my government doesn't take criticism very well, and we punish those who actually work towards the climate. On November 1st, my prime minister was at COP26, and he announced the pledges for India. And on the same day, Sudha Bharadwaj, who's a trade union activist and who also worked against exploitative coal mining in India, turned 60 years old in prison. And this was her 4th birthday in prison. And she's been in prison for 4 years without her trial even starting. She's 60 years old. She's had several medical conditions, and her bail has been denied several times. And this is just, the tip-berg of what it is to be an activist in India. We are being punished for thought crimes. So it did take a lot to, just get through this year and to continue my work. But I believe that the more, the state especially punishes me or anyone else for their work or for their beliefs, the more it reinforces those beliefs in me. And that's essentially what has kept me going.
And presumably, sorry, I think I need to look at that to look at you. Presumably, that sense of rising resurgence, creative connection that you have experienced with young people and activists around the world. I'd just like to move on to Elif, an artist whose work is constantly about unraveling the deceptions of states and of ourselves, often with great love, great compassion. Your latest book, The Island of Missing Trees, about love, loss, grief, but also a great love affair with the natural world and your fig tree. Do you think, Elif, that artists have a responsibility to collaborate in, with, through the truth? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Thank you so much. It's very inspiring to be part of this conversation, despite the grimness of the subject. Of course, we're talking about, and that's the beauty of art and literature, and that's the power of it, I believe. I think if you happen to be a storyteller from a wounded democracy, such as Turkey or Brazil or Venezuela, and the list is so long and it's getting longer, you don't have the luxury of being apolitical. You know, you can't say, I'm only going to talk about my fiction. I don't want to talk about what's happening outside the window when so much is happening out there. But to be honest, where we are right now, because we are at such a critical crossroads, I think many artists and writers and poets are also feeling this sense of urgency, you know, and the decisions that we're making right now are going to impact generations' life. So we cannot be disengaged. We cannot be atomized. And I think in our own way, in our own voice, we have to engage. I think the age we're living in is the age of angst. There's an existential angst, you know, there's anxiety, there's anger, there's frustration, disappointment, and fear as well. So we're all dealing with negative emotions. But it would be a much darker world if from the age of angst, we move into the age of apathy. I think if there's one emotion that is the most destructive, it's the lack of all emotions. It's numbness. The moment we become numb to each other's stories, sorrows, to inequalities. So this is why we need art, and this is why we need artists and writers and poets to engage, because through our stories, we can punch holes in those walls of numbness that are being erected around us.
Terrific. I think that's so beautifully put, that cutting through that so many creatives can do. And actually there is so many barriers put up to actually engage with what is happening, whether it be through bureaucracy or through techno-speak or through, as Ed said, through the data and the graphs. And actually there's something really basic about what's happening. It's just fantastic. Prem, you too are uncovering concealed truths through both your conservation work, but also using technology in really interesting ways. But crucially, you're also you're cutting through and challenging the status quo of privilege with Polar Impact. Would you like to tell us about your work and about this particular dimension of it, which is about that, again, that cut through to the truth?
Sure. So I am a polar conservationist and I'm a PhD student, and I entered really polar science by working on a project called Seals from Space, where it's all about using satellite technology to monitor seals in Antarctica. And, you know, this technology is beautiful in that it's accessible to so many people. So, you know, we have the opportunity for people from across all sections of society to become involved in polar science, to monitor these species, to monitor the penguins, the seals, the whales, all from their home. And that removes a barrier. But I think what became very apparent to me is when I moved to my department is just how homogeneous it was. And I grew up in a very sort of what for me was a typical inner city working class area with friends from, you know, all different cultures. And for me, that was Britain. But when I went to my department, I noticed it was only sort of one slither of British society. And the people I had grown up with weren't to be found. And, you know, this is a place where we're making decisions on the future of the planet. We're deciding, you know, how our science should be implemented in policy, and a loss of cultures essentially leads to a loss of voices and a loss of opinions and a loss of decision making. So because of that, I started to figure out, how can we make this change? How can we go about and, you know, having all the cultures I engaged with sort of return to climate activism, return to polar science, return to these issues which will affect everyone. And, you know, how can we sort of go beyond just not only including diverse groups within decision-making when it comes to climate action, but actually having them lead it. So that led to me establishing Polar Impact, which is all about featuring, highlighting and uplifting people of color within polar science, polar explorers, and anyone engaged within these regions, which are the most rapidly shifting and most rapidly changing regions impacted by climate change. And I suppose I've started to do a lot of outreach with this, and some of that is just making grime music from the noises of Antarctic seals. If anyone in the audience hasn't heard an Antarctic seal before, I highly recommend you go onto YouTube, have a listen. And to me, you know, it just sounded like the very sort of synthy, otherworldly noises I used to listening to grime as a kid. So I began doing this outreach with grime, and really the aim was to target this at sort of, I suppose, secondary school children. But as I started to do more outreach and talk to other kids across all age ranges, I realized just how early this cultural impact, which leads to people from certain societies, Black and Asian communities, not engaging with polar science, how early that starts. And I remember talking to this state school in London, sharing my work as a polar scientist, as a wildlife filmmaker. And I think what was really sad for me is that while these kids absolutely loved the polar regions, cared for its future, none of them asked me, how can I be a polar scientist like you? How can I be a wildlife filmmaker like you? And for me, that really was just heartbreaking to see, you know, kids early as perhaps 7 or 8, just not realizing and already deciding perhaps from a young age that they can't be the future when it comes to climate action. So really, I mean, the hope is with Polar Impact, we will change the face of polar science.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prem. And it shows how critical it is to actually involve people at all levels, at all ages, and that climate justice is as a concept actually starts right at home. So fantastic, thank you. Ez, over to you. So Ez is responsible for really amazing, spectacular shows. And I really wanted to ask you, first of all, about what you think the challenges are, because you're right at the literally the coalface of the kind of spectacular, our expectations of these amazing experiences, shows, but also, crucially, given that today Julie's Bicycle is sending a call out to culture ministers and environment ministers to start to be in dialogue where culture can align with climate science and do things differently as well as think things differently. I wanted to ask what you think are going to be the biggest challenges for you, an artist, a creator, a producer, on some of the world's biggest stages. You're on mute.
Start by unmuting. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me to join this panel. I feel really honored and humbled to be among some of my heroes here, so thank you. Yeah, I mean, diving right in there, coalface, I'm afraid, is the operative word in what I do, because we love to gather 100,000 people together in a stadium. We love to all be together. It's important for our sense of humanity to sing together. I mean, it's been proven neuroscientifically, the benefits of recognizing our sense of community when we do sing together, just what happens in our minds. We want to do this. And yet we know that the carbon footprint of a touring music show is horrendous. And Julie's Bicycle have been pioneering some tools that we all need to now start to work to, but it's a lot of intractable problems. One really absolute answer is don't go on tour. Don't have musicians traveling the world, just don't do it anymore. And then the other, it's every scale in between that. How do we improve every aspect of it? Robert Del Naja from Massive Attack, as many people would have read in The Guardian recently and on other newspapers, has been working closely with the Tyndall Centre in Manchester to come up with a set of tools for us to use to try and improve our practice, We're meeting regularly, urgently, to try and shift things. What I will say on the positive side is let's look at what happens when you put up a rock and roll show. The operational challenge of having to get a giant, huge piece of scenery, sound, lighting to be up, to be functioning perfectly within 48 hours is immense. The type of people who are able to set their minds to that operational challenge are well versed in achieving extraordinary things within parameters. What we need to do is add some extra parameters, right? We're used to saying we've only got this much time, we've only got this much budget, we've only got this much space. What we need to do is add another budget, which is the carbon budget, and say, how do we achieve all of those things and add this new parameter, which is real? We just haven't had the lens on to see it yet.
Terrific. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And actually what's really exciting is really recently, like in the last 6 months, just how much appetite there is to really look at practice as being absolutely fundamental so that you can embody your values in a different way. And you're doing some amazing pioneering leadership in that. Really excited. Nova, at last we get to you. You call yourself a life artist. It's a really beautiful idea. And can you just tell us a little bit about what that means to you and the work that you've done around that concept?
Okay. So, a life artist, because, it's not like in this climate movement, it's not enough just to become an artist, right? So you have to put the best out of it, but then it's also not enough to be the best as well, but you have to put it out there, and then it's still not enough, because then after you're responsible to put it out there, but then you need to be consistent as well, and you have to live inside your art, because I saw a lot of cases that a lot of musicians that talk about like climate justice and in climate activism actually also just talk about it in their art, but also not doing it in their life. So what I meant about life artist is actually me doing like manifestation of my own art. It's not really a good thing to just like make art, and especially if it's not good, you make art, you better make it good, and you don't really committed to the things that you write or you sing, because when you leave art in this world, the lifespan of that art can go like forever, like you don't know, like it's like countless time, right? So then you need to make sure that you have to be very careful to pick your words, because you have audience and you will always find your audience. So that's what I meant with the life artist, to be an artist that live inside its own art.
Thank you, which Nova Ruth will be hearing from later, and I think you'll be able to see what you're talking about, which is that really deep embodied experience. I think we might have some time for some questions. Any questions? There's nothing. We have got some time. Good. Does anybody have any questions, first of all, either from the audience to any of these panelists or from Trello? Sorry, over there. And if you'd like to say who you are and if there's a particular person you'd like to talk to, or if it's a general question. Okay.
Can I sit down, because I'm not a public speaker? Thanks. Okay, my name's Sarah. I'm from Ireland. I don't work in the arts now, but I did a master's in cultural policy and arts management in UCD about 6 years ago. And I read an amazing book about 2 years ago called The Mind in the Cave, by a guy called something, I think he's Llewellyn something, he's an anthropologist, and it speaks about, it's all about the art in the Paleolithic era that they found in the caves, and how art was the kind of the channel through which spirituality came into their lives, that they did all these various research that seemed to add up to that's what the role was, And I think from my arts education, I think you can't put responsibilities on artists because it's nearly like a kind of censorship, you know, telling them what to do. You know, then they're not free creators as such. But I think because artists are already living lives that are kind of outside of this kind of economics-focused livelihood that the rest of us have, that you're already living on a kind of a higher plane. So you're in a kind of an advantageous position to communicate the situation. So it's not so much a question, just a plea, or not even a plea because that's asking you to do something and getting in the way of your creativity. But I think artists are in a unique position to have the power to communicate from your advantage of being already not finance focused in your lives, but having the talents that you have. And that you could step up in a world where so few people listen to spiritual guides in churches anymore. Maybe they'll listen to artists. And that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you. That kind of speaks to the point that Elif was making. Actually, you've all made it a bit, but that point about creative responsibility and artistic responsibility that we've talked a little bit about. That balance between being instrumental and telling people what they need to do, but actually also having a responsibility. Does anybody on the panel, great, Ez. Yeah, Elif and Ez. Ez, over to you first.
I just wanted to respond because I thought that was so beautifully put, Sarah. And you're absolutely right. And I know Elif will speak beautifully to this as well, but in an absence of collective religion, we as artists are absolutely, as you say, the responsibility is on us to provide ceremony, to provide ritual, to provide these beats that humans have always had to give their lives meaning and value. Give our lives, I should say, counting myself as a human, meaning and value. Because if we can help also for ourselves to be able to see each other as entwined with the rest of the biosphere, it will really help us value it in the way that we need to in order to make the shifts in our behavior that we're going to have to. There was a wonderful thing that, I'm not sure if they're in the audience today, but Alice Adey and Jack Harris from Earthrise were speaking to Sonia Guadalajara about reforesting the mind. And I think if we consider that and we start to recognize that we actually are already forested within, you know, the shapes within our lungs are already mini trees. We have bronchial trees. The same maths that governs the division of branches in a forest governs the division of the bronchial trees within our lungs. We need to make those kind of connections. And you're absolutely right that we're trained in pattern finding. We've been given the privilege of having the time and space to seek these patterns. And it's on us now to communicate and provide spaces for ceremony and ritual.
Thank you. Fantastic. Elif, would you like to?
I also thought the question was so beautiful, and of course everything that Es said is resonating with me deeply. But I just wanted to emphasize that art is the beauty of art, the beauty of literature also is that it's for everyone. It doesn't belong to a particular group. You know, there's no elitism. There shouldn't be any kind of hierarchy within the world of arts. The doors of a book is open to everyone. And I think we live in an age in which we have way too much information, more than we can ever process, but we have very little knowledge and even less wisdom. So we need to change that ratio completely, radically. Let's deal with less information, but let's aim for knowledge and ultimately for wisdom. And for wisdom, we need to bring the mind and the heart together. It's all about connecting dots, you know? And that's why we cannot be single issue activists. We cannot focus on single issues. You know, if you care about climate, you care about inequality. If you care about inequality, you care about racial, gender, class, regional, digital inequalities. So I think we have entered an age in which we have to connect the dots with compassion, but also with clarity.
Thank you. Absolutely. There's another. Great. We have another question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Monica, and I'm an artist and also the director of an organization called Plus Peace, and we use cultural and narrative strategies to build peace. And I'm here trying to connect the arts, creativity, peace building, and climate. And one thing, I was at the Minga Indígena last night session, and one thing that was said, and it's something I've been thinking about, is this is fringe. This is a fringe conversation. The main conversation is really talking about market solutions to climate change. And what was said last night was, the problem is market solutions. It's been 500 years of market solutions that have caused climate disaster. And the solution is not a different type of climate solution, but it's actually not putting a value on a whale, price tag on a tree. This is because we have to put value on it because they have no worth to us. So my question is what role do you think arts have to bring worth to climate? How can we show that? How can we express that? How can we actually embody that narrative? Because that's a very different conversation than putting price tags on whales and trees.
Yeah, thank you. Amazingly great question. Who'd like to pitch in on that one? Anybody from the panel would like to respond to that? Great, Ravi, Disha, sorry.
I think one thing we need to acknowledge is the fact that we've been accustomed to thinking that they need to have a price tag for them to have a value. But the truth is, you can't put a value on trees. You can't put a value on oceans and ecosystems. They are literally the reason we are alive. And that is what essentially art does. Art makes us question the systems that have, it caused the climate crisis, essentially. This capitalist system is essentially why we've had to put a price on natural biodiversity and ecosystems to showcase their value. But the truth is, you cannot measure it with something as fragile as money, because a tree gives more life to quite literally the whole planet and it's a lot of its members, and you can't put a price on that. Because money and the concept of it is so fragile, and it just won't compare to the earth and everything it has to offer. And I think art has made us question that system, and art has made us question if the systems we exist in are the systems that will solve the climate crisis. And I think that is essentially why we need art and culture and so many artistic elements and words and language. And it is all of these things that will make us understand how we can address the climate crisis, because we need to change how these things are viewed to address the climate crisis.
Thank you. Does any of the other panelists want to respond to that particular point? Prem.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as someone who is a scientist and also works, as a creative, as an artist, I think one thing which I notice is it can be very easy to explain and understand how bad a situation is, but to feel how bad a situation is, that's when art comes in. And I think, just being able to really grasp and have that emotional or environmental empathy, that connection to go, okay, I understand in words, I understand in numbers, I understand in writing, this is a bad situation, but it's only through storytelling and it's only through art that you can actually feel exactly what that means, and to have that personal connection, which leads to cultural change. And I think, if you look at what's happened through storytelling in sort of very recent history, I mean, Blue Planet 2, I'm sure many of the audience members here have watched that. The impact Blue Planet 2 had on the discussion around plastic pollutions, I mean, that led to not just a change in policy, it led to a change in societal behavior. And, that's really when artists come, I mean, it really shows you what the essential role of artists are, in that, we're taking the science, but it's through the storytelling that you really relate it and really bring about action and change.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Any other comments on that point? Ez.
I mean, just to give an example, I'm not sure if any of you in the audience were at Stella McCartney's presentation a couple of days ago, but she showed a video that she'd actually made, I think, 20 years ago, because she's been campaigning for the end to animal mistreatment, the end to the use of leather, the end to the use of fur, the end to the eating of meat. Obviously, her mother was a big campaigner in this field in the 70s and 80s that we were all aware of. And she shows this video, which actually, when I was growing up in the 80s, we used to see more of this, just some straight out, a sort of, you know, inverse of Blue Planet, I guess. It was, you know, footage taken, very disturbing footage in abattoirs across the whole scene of, you know, vile slaughter and, you know, cruelty to animals across the whole spectrum of industrial farming and fur and leather manufacture. And we all sat there in the big Kelvin Grove gorgeous museum, and she showed us this video that she'd made 20 years ago. And there was no one in that audience who wasn't moved by it, who didn't feel a really urgent sense of grief. And she's always been moved by the animal welfare issue, just saying, let's not do this anymore, and let's not force people to work in these environments anymore. But obviously now it's much broader in that everybody's aware of the impact of this industrial animal slaughter on the climate as well. So I think something as impactful as just showing us, making us look at that footage, and then producing a beautiful bag that's made out of mycelium leather and saying, look, you can have this bag instead of the leather bag. I think that kind of approach from a fashion designer is really what we need across every outlet, really.
Thank you. Any other comments before we move on to another question? You've got a Slido. Any other comments? No. Should we move on?
I just wanted to quickly make a comment on a positive note, because I think we're obviously in Britain and we're being very British about this. And this is a rallying call to everybody else. Change is happening. So as Devlin's a bit of a creative hero of mine, so that's somebody there who's got Olivier Awards from theatre, working with Trevor Nunn. You know, in terms of shows, doing shows, Kanye West, Adele, Beyonce, U2. So as we can see, if someone like Es Devlin is talking about this and then putting on her own exhibits, and I'm sure she'll touch it, and everybody else here, it is happening. So if you're not paying attention, you're behind the curve. Julie's Bicycle, they've been working with orchestras, Philharmonia Orchestra and South Bank Centre. So it is happening, it is there. So yeah, just be positive about that. And there's a question from the crowd. It's how do we bring this important discussion to the main stage of COP as well as within our own countries? Arts and culture has to be at the heart of development.
Well, I'll just quickly answer that a bit. I think whoever wrote that, I totally agree. Art, this is kind of what we've done this big piece of research. There is only one arts council that we know internationally that has structurally put in place, that's Argentina. There might be others, but we certainly didn't find them, that has structurally put alongside the climate commitments of that country, has structurally put alongside their cultural policy. It's happening. Certainly, there's in the UK. There's a lot of work that's gone into it. But actually, what we need is to meet really in a really hardcore way. Is to meet the demands that the scientists are making on us to change what we do in order to really unlock that potential of culture, the arts, creative industries to really do what needs to be done. And we need to do it fast. And one of the things I would say, Sega, is yes, you're right. Lots of people are doing lots of stuff. But, you know, I think culture has been a bit behind as a system. It's an ecosystem just like any others. And that system really has got, because we've got such exponential capacity to drive change in all the ways that Chiara described, it's an incredibly important responsibility, and we now need to just get on with it as quickly as we can. And that includes the structure of culture, as well as all these amazing people who are doing stuff. It needs to be embedded right into the system of how we work, the processes of how we work. Does anybody from the panel want to comment on that point, or any of the points that Sega's just made? Elif.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what you so beautifully said. I think this is a moment in which we're going to need both pessimism and optimism, right? Because a healthy dose of pessimism is needed to make us more alert, more aware of what's going on. But of course, too much pessimism pulls us down. So we need optimism as well, and we need hope. And that's going to come from our fellow human beings. I think what we remember as human beings, we mostly remember through emotions. Maya Angelou, she said this so beautifully. She said, you know, people might forget what you've said. They might forget what you've done, but they will never forget how you made them feel, you know? So we always connect via feelings. If things are conveyed to us via numbers, statistics, data, there are studies that show we forget very easily. But if we know the stories behind them, then we remember. And if I may quickly add this, I think it's also a moment in which women and minorities need to be more not dominant, but active in these conversations. We have to be in these public spaces because every study shows that women and minorities are going to be disproportionately affected from the pandemic, from the decline of democracy, and from the destruction of our climate and our environment. So I think it is a moment in which we have to enter these public conversations more passionately.
Absolutely, yeah. Any other comment? We've got 1 more minute left. Ez, and then
I don't want to take up the last minute.
Well, if you're quick, we can also have Nova Ruth. Sorry, go on.
Nova, you go first.
Thank you. We're thinking about positivity and how we can experience change, right? And I think we have to always remember each of us here has a dream. Each of us here maybe already go into a process that you already reached that dream as well, right? And each of us here also dream to have some kind of change, you know, like in terms of climate crisis, and how can we actually support how to fasten the process of that change as well. So I think what I'm about to say is like everybody who has dream also have fears as well. A lot of fears, such as like, what if it will never come true? What if the plans has failed and all that? But each of us need to live that dream, because that's the most exciting part, right? It's like you don't know if your dream is possible, but if I can share my experience, because I didn't know that reaching this kind of alternative lifestyle, which is living on a sailboat, performing on top of it, sharing it in remote places about climate change and how we can be resilient. I thought it was impossible, but it's actually just improbable. There is a little probability that this will achieved, and it's actually possible. So then we still need to have a hope that a change is still there, the possibility is still there, and we shouldn't lose hope and still dreaming and trying to achieve it every day.
Thank you so much, Nova Ruth. Ez, did you want to add anything to that?
I just thought that was so beautifully put. And just to pick up very briefly on what Nova said, I mean, and to Sega's point, because I felt, you know, yes, we've been engaged in the art of what I used to call the just about possible. You know, when we try and make extraordinary things happen, it's the just about possible that we need to engage in.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Well, there are many great questions. So thank you so much to the whole of the panel. And then also Alison for chairing that, and beautiful words. And now we're very lucky to share a performance from panelist Nova Ruth, recorded in the Arca Kinara, which is a boat, and that's from Indonesia. So over to this video.
Sopo tati dalam sing lali sedulur papat limo pancen iso nyekel wayang ora iso tati panutan lan pager bumi konjang kanjeng langit kemarang urip ketunian wong cilik roti anggang mikir weteng atine peteng urip ketaten sing penting ati seneng.
Well, thank you very much, Nova Ruth, for that mesmerizing performance. And I really recommend you to watch the full screening. That was just one of the songs that we had time to put on today. And I'd like to thank Alison for chairing the panel so brilliantly. And to stay in touch with Julie's Bicycle, go to juliesbicycle.com and sign up to the mailing list there. And one final comment is this has been amazingly put together by Julie's Bicycle and the team there, but it definitely needs support. They've been doing it for over a decade, and it needs that structural support, the financial support. Show we're serious about this. So I'll just leave Alison to close.
Thank you, Sega. Thank you to all the panelists. We really appreciate you taking your time for this. Thank you so much, Ed, for taking time out of these negotiations to come and speak to us, and also to everybody in the room. It's really great to see you and everybody online. It really does make a huge difference to know that this is one of the sort of lifebloods that is bringing us all together, connecting us, and giving us the energy and the creativity and the courage to support the great work of our artists. Zena, Selena, just extraordinary, fantastic stuff. I'm just going to thank people. I'll do it in order, otherwise I'll forget somebody, and I really don't want to do that at all. So, of course, Selena, Wulu, and Zena Edwards and Nova Ruth, wonderful performances. Ez, Devlin, Elif Shafak, Disha Aravi, Prem Gill, terrific. terrific. And again, thanks to all the wonderful activists who've shared their messages for COP26 on our video that we saw at the beginning. Thank you to Manning Gottlieb, OMD, for supporting our communications team. Key partnerships with the British Council who've been absolutely terrific throughout this programme. Season for Change, our partners, Arts Admin, and all the artists involved in that great programme, and the Arts Council England, our long-standing sponsor, Good Energy, Renewable Energy, and thank you to the Green Zone technical team who've been really nice, and actually everybody around the Green Zone. I don't know if you agree, but everybody's been really friendly, helpful, supporting everybody behind this. Thank you to the Julie's Bicycle team. They've been amazing. They're a fantastic team to work with. I hope some of you, if you don't already know them, you get to know them. To Chiara Badiali in the front here, to Sophie Schnapp, also in the front, and to Natalie Candell, who's organised this, and to the team who are back in outside COP, to Ruby Kvalheim, Ruby, brilliant, Sarah Leach, Tega Okiti, Izzy Parish, Farah Ahmed, all of whom have been working to make this project what it is. And finally, thank you to our fantastic MC, Love Sega, whose video I'm delighted to share with you. So just before you go, the last little bit of icing on the cake is Sega's amazing video that he did as part of Season for Change that has kind of taken off all over the place. And it's called Our World, Fight for Air.
To our world, is this the place that South London voiceless speak? Cause I can't see them past these non-existent headlines. Divide and conquer got us here, and oil prices are your fear. Cause black gold is not the people, it's your mineral extraction. We don't need hyperbole or distractions. Give us the facts, we don't want the factions. We have the people, we have the stories. Show us the pictures, not allegories. More than just the posters on the street. This is where we live, die and eat. So if you want to break bread with me, then come and take a seat. Do we really care? Yeah. 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 Do we really care? Cause we'll fight for our right. Yeah. Welcome to our world, South Circular. It's more than a thoroughfare for people who want to live, breathe and reside here. And if protest is to be banned, is it not underhand? For those of us who don't want to work hand in glove, we just want to have a hand in love. Look after your family, stay alive, please. HGV 6 axles, 44 tons, 2 inches and 54 foot on top of that. As it circles around our south, happily chugging and leaving our children's lungs black. NO2 means something to me, but what does it mean to you, or do you not care? Because you think you're in an area that's for the well-to-do. But it's not about wealth or taste. Carbon monoxide will get to you too, no haste. Now let's see what will happen. Respiratory bad patterns can't even get the man at the top. He survived it, others did not. 150,000 plus can't be forgot. So please let us breathe before the breathing stops.